Hello everyone, welcome to Pages and Reels. This is Harper. Today I wanted to talk about Jane Eyre, written by the great Charlotte Bronte. I discovered Jane Eyre in high school, but truly fell in love with the novel and the heroine when I was at university. It was so unexpected too. I just reached for it one random day where it had been sitting on my shelf for ages, and all of a sudden something clicked, and within a very short time, my copy of this book became dog-eared, worn, and stained with many different types of food and drink. Initially, it was more the romance of the novel that I was fixated on, the deeply passionate, ethereal connection between Jane and her Mr. Rochester against the wild, haunting backdrop. It was only as I got older I truly began to appreciate Jane as an individual character, and the spirit of Charlotte Bronte that was obviously reflected through this unlikely, unassuming heroine. In all honesty, I dislike Mr. Rochester more with time, though I don't think I ever warmed to him to start with. Also, I felt that certain parts of the novel jarred against its overriding themes and actually dimmed the light of Jane's strength of character. But I will get all into that later. It is interesting how our opinions change about the same story as time passes, and how your understanding and appreciation of the characters also alter. Before I get further into the novel, I am assuming that you have read it, and therefore will discuss the story with full spoilers. My admiration and empathy for Charlotte Bronte is overflowing. Her life wasn't at all an easy one, and by today's standards, she died very young and tragically due to pregnancy complications during what could still be called the honeymoon period of her marriage. She had to see so many of her loved ones die, her mother and all her siblings, and when I read about her life, I get a sense of gloom and overriding sorrow and grief permeating even her more joyful times. Of course, unlike many artists like Kafka or Van Gogh, she did live to experience her fame. Jane Eyre caused a sensation when it came out. But I don't know, it doesn't seem enough. I feel like she deserved a lot more than she got overall, and it makes me feel very sad. It is widely known that Jane Eyre was modelled on Bronte herself, and that many events in the novel also directly parallel the events that happened in her own life. But she didn't meet her Mr. Rochester, which to be honest may not have been a bad thing. She ended up marrying a curate, and by all accounts was very happy, which makes her untimely death even more tragic. But Jane Eyre lives on, and it still breathes through the hearts and minds of so many people even after all this time. Like I said, when I was younger, I loved the Byronic passion and romance of the story, and that was my focal point. But it is now Jane's independence, free spirit and integrity that draws me to her. Her strength of character and her intelligence are the highlights of the novel to me. I also got the feeling, had her life not been so dreary, her sense of humour would have been able to fully develop into the cheeky, edgy quick-wittedness that we see flashes of when she banters with Mr. Rochester. The main gripe I have about this novel, which I mentioned before, is how religious themes are randomly inserted into it, no doubt to appease the Victorian audience from what would otherwise be a very scandalous story for that time. I feel like Bronte actually didn't want to include the religious components into her novel. In fact, to me, it goes against the whole trajectory of Jane's character because she is not a woman who needs religion to guide her through the world. She has enough strength and conviction within herself to be her own compass. So I felt myself cringe whenever those components came up. It sounded so contrived. I understand why Bronte did it, of course, but I don't like it one bit. It just came across preachy and self-righteous. Especially the part where Rochester goes through his whole religious conversion. But yeah, Victorian society was ruthless. Just ask Thomas Hardy. You couldn't be too unorthodox. Another thing I didn't realise until I was older was that 18, which is when Jane Eyre meets Mr. Rochester, is very young. He even calls her his girl bride. Maybe people might say standards were different back then, but even Mrs. Fairfax mentions the age difference and describes Jane as being so young when she finds out about their relationship, meaning that even for Bronte's time, that age gap did raise eyebrows. I think Rochester is supposed to be at least in his late 30s, almost 40 when they first meet, which is uncomfortable, especially because Jane's life has been so sheltered compared to the worldly Rochester, and it does create a distinct power imbalance. As I said, I don't think I ever liked the character of Rochester, but I didn't recognise the full extent of his manipulative and toxic behaviour until I got older. Testing Jane to see if she does love him, gaslighting her constantly about Bertha Mason, and just outright lying to her and coercing her into a false marriage. I mean, come on, the red flags could not be redder. I honestly don't know what Jane saw in him. The only thing working in his favour through the modern lens is that he does seem to love her nature, her non-compliant, fiercely independent nature that challenges and questions him. And I doubt many men, especially in that era, would have seen Jane's free spirit as a positive. He does treat her as his equal in that respect, so he earns a few weak brownie points there. But is that enough? It doesn't make up for all the other crap he pulls on her. I mean, talk about traumatizing someone. Is that loving someone, Edward? I cannot believe Jane went back to him. I have always wondered how much Mrs. Fairfax knew. Rochester does call her simple, and she honestly must have been a simpleton if she truly didn't notice anything was off in her own home. But Rochester also states she might have suspected something was up, so that's what I'm going with. She knew something was going on but felt like it was none of her business, so turned a blind eye. I mean, turning a blind eye happens today too, so it's not unbelievable. The number of people who don't question because they themselves are in a stable, comfortable position is very common. Moving on, I know there is also an interpretation that Jane was bisexual, which I can see why people would read her that way, though of course there is never any confirmation of this theory in the novel for obvious reasons. To me, Jane's relationship with Helen Burns can be read either way. It may just have been a close platonic friendship between two girls who were both going through the same trauma, or possibly a budding romance that couldn't be realised, or maybe somewhere in the middle. Adult Jane doesn't really show any signs of bisexuality, and in certain cultures, including Victorian culture and in many cultures today, romantic friendships happen, so her perceived fixation on women could simply have been that. It's interesting though, bisexual Jane actually kind of makes sense to me. That would be in line with the rest of her character, so I kind of like it. So let's dive into the adaptations of Jane Eyre. I haven't seen all of them, there are a lot. So today I will discuss 4. I would say in terms of appearance and only appearance, Charlotte Gainsbourg in the 1996 Franco Zeffirelli adaptation embodies the Jane Eyre of my imagination the most accurately. I personally have had a thing for Charlotte Gainsbourg since the first time I saw her, so obviously I like the way she looks. But it is easy to imagine back in that time, Bronte's time, when a different look was very much in vogue, Gainsbourg's modern chicness may not have been fully appreciated. In terms of characterization, Gainsbourg doesn't quite embody Jane's fiery, independent character. She's a lot softer in this movie, and dare I say, a bit bland. I know the movie cuts out a lot of the novel or changes certain things completely, so it makes sense that we don't get to fully see the Jane of the book. But there were certain points in the movie where Jane is so stilted that she is wooden. She lacked the vitality that is supposed to be boiling furiously just under the surface of her heart. Speaking of gentle, I don't know what William Hurt's angle was when he portrayed Mr. Rochester. Gone is the sardonic, acidic sense of humour so typical of him. Gone are his gruffness and moodiness. Instead, we get a clearly well-bred, well-mannered, mostly even-tempered man of his time. I felt like he belonged more in something Austen would have written, rather than the thundering romanticism of Charlotte Bronte. So yeah, Gainsbourg has the quietness and stillness of Jane very well covered, as well as her elfin otherworldliness, but the passion and fieriness didn't translate well enough. And overall, I thought this movie told more than showed, and rushed through the plot too quickly. Quick shout out to the actors though, who played the young Jane and Helen. I thought they acted very well, and Anna Paquin, who plays the young Jane, definitely embodied the fiery spirit of Jane in the short screen time that she got. The 1997 adaptation with Samantha Morton is one I found out about last. Morton does the best she can, but Ciarán Hinds' Mr. Rochester is a lunatic, the polar opposite of Hurt's overly genteel interpretation. I don't think Mr. Rochester is supposed to scream like a banshee on a regular basis at Jane. His way is more dry, sarcastic and underhand. When Hinds first comes crashing into the scene on his horse, then starts screaming at her, my first thought was, WTF? Then, Jane, just run, girl, he's not worth it. Hinds' overacting overshadows anything Morton tries and takes the attention away from her, but not in a good way. Kind of like a flute being drowned out by the blasting of a broken trumpet. Especially in that scene where she's trying to leave him after finding out about his first wife, it was kind of difficult to watch him carrying on like some unhinged tyrant. I half expected him to hit her at certain points in between all the name-calling. Despite all his manipulative tactics and gaslighting, Mr. Rochester never verbally abuses Jane in the book. And even in his moments of desperation, he is still very tender with her despite his emotional outbursts. You never think Jane is ever afraid of him. You get a sense underneath all that sardonic moodiness, Mr. Rochester is in fact softer than Jane, maybe like a deeply wounded golden retriever. But in this movie, someone needs to call on the authorities. The domestic is escalating scarily. I actually said out loud, watching this movie, when Mr. Rochester demands where Jane is going in one of the earlier scenes, I actually said, "Away from you, you crazy banshee." True story. Oddly enough, his relationship with Adele is actually the nicest out of all the adaptations I've seen of Jane Eyre. The way they speak French together and the way they interact with each other is very reminiscent of father and daughter. So that threw me. Also, because I don't want to just keep trashing this adaptation, there is a scene that made me laugh. It's when Jane comes back from visiting her aunt. That visit is completely cut out, by the way, in the movie. Rochester's indignance at her not writing to him was communicated in the comical, dry and sarcastic manner that is very characteristic of the book Rochester. It was the closest that Hinds came to embodying the way Rochester is supposed to be. Mrs. Fairfax is a lot sassier in this adaptation than in the novel. And she is aware of the madwoman in the attic, also in this movie, but she believes it to be Adele's mother. The oldest adaptation I have watched of Jane Eyre is the 1986 version starring Zella Clark and Mr. Rochester, played by Timothy Dalton. Timothy Dalton steals the attention away from Zella Clark, but this time in an entirely different way to Ciarán Hinds. A very strong argument can be made that Timothy Dalton was way too handsome to play Mr. Rochester. But then I think back in Bronte's time, rugged features weren't actually in vogue. They actually liked a softer look, even in males. Dalton's acting is so on point that you forget technicalities about appearance anyway. He is Edward Rochester. Whoever cast him, all the brownie points to you. The way Dalton speaks and the body language he uses just breathes Edward Rochester at every second.